What is Billy Edwards Jr. bringing to Madison? Let's go to the source. Let's go to the expert.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm Roast Ryan Herrings, as always, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Appreciate the absolute heck out of you being here today. We got a special show. We got Locked On Terps, Trey Moore just stopping by. We're going to talk Billy Edwards Jr., the Badgers quarterback coming in from the portal. Just want to start here, Trey. What's the scouting report? Just the overall, who is Billy Edwards Jr.?
Yeah, I mean, the scouting report is, I think he had a solid year in the Big Ten. And I think he's a solid Big Ten quarterback. And that's kind of where I align him. But in terms of him and his actual scout and his play style, one thing that I think is the number one thing when you scout Billy Edwards is he's 6'3". He's built like a quarterback, like what you want a quarterback to be built like. Got that prototypical kind of size. Has a big arm, actually. Sometimes he doesn't know exactly how to control it. But when we talk about just purely scouting him, definitely has the arm and has a big arm. 6'3", big arm, has a lot of those attributes that a lot of people want, and can also run the football. So in terms of physically gifted, in terms of just scouting him in kind of a basic type of way, in terms of that type of skill, he's a pretty high level type of talent in terms of the physical attributes when you scout him. And I think those are some of the things that a lot of people like about Billy. And I think that's some of the best parts about him is just his physical attributes when you just look at him and when you scout him overall.
What was the fan base, the Terps fan base feel on him in general? What was your sense on that?
Yeah, mixed emotions for sure. Before the season started, we weren't even sure he was going to be the starter. He was in a competition with MJ Morris, and a lot of fans, it felt like a lot of the people that comment on Locked on Terps and a lot of the Maryland people, they were pretty split on Billy Edwards versus MJ Morris going into the season. But I think the fans, as the season went on, he started off well, and a lot of people felt pretty good about him being our starter at the first part of the season, and we're excited about how he was doing things, how he was throwing the football, how he was throwing to Ty Felton, who had a really good year for Maryland football, and how he was connecting with those guys. And I think a lot of people thought that his throwing was going to be challenging. And so people felt really good at the start of it, just how he was looking and how he was throwing the football specifically, and with what Mike Locksley was asking him to do. But I would definitely say it went downhill as the year continued to go on. People definitely started to say, play MJ Morris. Why isn't MJ Morris getting time as the season went down? I would say a little bit about halfway through, it started going downhill, but it wasn't all Billy Edwards' fault by any means. But the fans definitely were near the end of the season. I think they were ready to try something else out. And that's kind of how overall the fan base felt about him. And then in terms of him leaving, I think the fans had mixed emotions. I think some wanted him to stay because they're like, we have Malik Washington coming in and to be a good mentor, who's a 4-star quarterback coming in the 25 class. But I think some were just ready for him to go, and they wanted to start the Malik Washington era. So it's kind of conflicting perspectives overall from the fans.
Well, let's jump into this. So one of the things you mentioned was that conflicting perspectives. This is a question from Jack. Again, I asked if anyone had questions for you because they were coming on. I got a lot of people because people are excited about the quarterback, man. That's what it's all about. Yeah. Jack asked, what's the biggest weakness? So some of that conflicting stuff, what caused some of that conflicting stuff? What's his biggest weakness?
I would definitely say consistency throwing the football in terms of accuracy. Like I said, he has a big arm. Like, theoretically, he can make all the throws and has that type of talent to be able to, but controlling it in terms of accuracy, playing and play out, continue to make throws, continuing sometimes just to make some of the easier throws as well is something that I think he struggles with, that we've seen him struggle with at Maryland. And it's his biggest knock by far. And I definitely think that's his biggest weakness, just basic accuracy sometimes. Like sometimes you'll see him throw a really nice throw to some of our receivers or tight ends or whatever the case is. And then another time he'll be like, how did he miss that throw? So sometimes it's a little bit conflicting in that way and a little bit confusing in that way. And you just want him to hone in that accuracy. And if he could do that at times, it felt like he could move into like a really solid territory in terms of quarterback play in college football and in the Big Ten. But sometimes that inconsistency holds him back a little bit and more than it should. So I just think that sometimes just throw on a throw to throw basis, he's not as good as he should be putting the balls in the right spots or allowing his receivers just to make easy catches, but he will show sometimes the ability to make some big time throws.
And what about the offensive line? So one of the things we've heard a lot is he maybe didn't have the best offensive line to help him.
Yes.
Good receiver for sure. You mentioned Felton. How much of his struggles and the consistency do you think is the offensive line?
A lot of it. Maryland's offensive line, I say on Locked on Terps, I think it was the worst in the Big Ten. I'm not an expert on every offensive line, but I know Maryland's had to be bottom 2 or 3 in the Big Ten, and just one of the worst in college football in the Power 4 conferences. And it was a huge effect. We couldn't pass block. We couldn't pass block at all. So that's a big part of what I was saying the entire year is like, I don't really know how to judge this guy sometimes because we can't protect him. So I don't know why I would expect him to be able to come out here and deliver at a really high level. And you would still see him play really well sometimes, even with a poor offensive line. And I think that kind of goes with his legs and stuff. But I think that's a really big part of it. And if Wisconsin can put a better offensive line than Maryland can, which they absolutely should be able to, that Maryland had last year, then Billy Edwards should be able to be successful next year. But that was a huge part of it. And I just think you unfairly got graded sometimes because a lot of people aren't going to look at the offensive line play. They're just going to look at the stat sheet or whatever the case is. And the offensive line play was bad. And Maryland likes to throw the ball a lot. And so it would be hard because he just wouldn't have a lot of time. Sometimes he would throw or hold on to the ball too long, but the offensive line was a huge factor. Like that's definitely a thing. I saw that brought up a lot with him transferring. That was definitely absolutely a thing this year. That I thought was a big reason why he didn't play at a high level or a pretty good level a lot of the season.
Yeah, one of the things you hit on too, and it ties in with the offensive line, is the legs.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple questions we had in here. This is from Burtis. What is the mobility level? You see the type guy on 3rd and 7 that can scramble for the first down.
Yes, he absolutely is. I think that's the strength of his game. But if you just look at the numbers this year, you won't really see it because I don't know why. And I would say at every podcast, it felt like during the week, I'd be like, we got to use Billy Edwards' legs more. But before this season, everyone thought Billy Edwards as like a dual threat guy, like he can run the ball, like that's the biggest strength. And we didn't see Mike Locksley use that enough. Like he can do design runs, like all those different things. He can run, like he's an athlete. That's I think the strength of his game, and we didn't even see him use that all the time at Maryland this year. Which I think will, if Wisconsin used that the right way, then they definitely, I think he can be really good too. But he's definitely a guy that can move the chains in terms of with running the football 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, thirds and longs, and then also he's really good in short yardage. Even when we had Talia a couple years ago, we would throw Billy Edwards in for sneaks, 4th and 1s, 3rd and 1s. Like a couple of years ago against Michigan, he actually had 3 rushing touchdowns. So he's really good on the ground. And I think that's something that we kind of honed back this year. I don't know if we wanted to keep him healthy or what the case was. But definitely that's a part of his game. And then he's also a big dude, so he can run over guys, but obviously you probably want him to slide and those different things. But you can run some design runs, QB power, those different types of things, the read options, definitely in play with him. And I think that's one of the more exciting parts about his game.
Yeah, Badger fans are going to like hearing that because the last couple of years we've had struggles on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. Those when you need 3 inches. It's really fascinating that Maryland has used him in that role previously, even before this year. Yeah. All right, coming up next, we're going to keep Trey on for one more segment. Really appreciate the time. We're going to talk a little bit about his toughness. And I kind of want to ask Trey about how he feels with Maryland in the Big Ten now. Is that fit starting to feel more and more comfortable? That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. And as always, a quick second to say thank you for tuning into Locked On Badgers. We really do appreciate you. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, the #1 sportsbook. If you need to do any type of sportsbook action, go to FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the NFL, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's what I use because it's fast, it's simple, it's easy, it's secure. I've talked about that a bunch. Like if you win your money, you're going to get it back out of FanDuel. Some places out there, I wouldn't trust it. FanDuel's safe, it's fast. Great time to do it. NFL playoffs are going to be coming up. College football playoffs are still rolling. College basketball is going on. Obviously, the Big Ten and major college basketball teams everywhere. A great time to get started with FanDuel. As always, do it responsibly. But right now, new users get $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the NFL and the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. You're not going to go wrong. Today's episode also brought to you by our incredible friends over at Rocket Money. I've talked about this all the time. Everyone has New Year's resolutions. I don't even make it a resolution. Let's just be a little better with our finances. Let's treat ourselves like we're the CFO of whatever you're doing of your personal life. If you were managing money for a company, you'd be on point. Let's manage money for ourselves like we manage for a company. Rocket Money is a personal finance app. They're incredible. They save an average of $740 a year for their users. Get rid of unwanted subscriptions, fast and easy and simple. They bring everything into one spot so you can get rid of those unnecessary subscriptions, which I've told you, I have like 7 of them. Not anymore because Rocket Money pruned them, like a good gardener, taking off those tree limbs you don't want. That's what Rocket Money did for me. What can it do for you? Head over to Rocket Money, cancel your unwanted subscriptions, reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Let's jump back into this conversation with Trey. Definitely want to give you an opportunity, man. Talk about what you're doing. I have your Twitter there. I know you're doing Locked On Terps. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, you can just find it at Locked On Terps on YouTube. And then if you can follow me on Twitter too at Trey_Moore 13. But Locked On Terps everywhere, wherever you get your podcast too. For any Maryland fans or any Wisconsin fans that might want to hear about any Maryland news or anything like that. A lot of basketball going on right now. So just Locked On Terps for that.
No, I love hoops, man. Let me ask you this. You talked about the scouting report, but what Schmitty asked, what's his best attribute? What would you say the very best thing Billy Edwards Jr. does?
I think it's his legs. Like I kind of mentioned before, I do think that's his best part of his game. When you get him outside the pocket, when you get him rolling around, I think his legs are this part that really separates him at times and can take him into a really high part of your team. But I think that's his best attribute in a lot of the physical stuff that he brings in terms of having a really strong arm, being able to push the ball down the field when he's accurate in terms of his arm strength and things like that. Not a throw on the field that he can't make. It's just about the consistency in making it. So I really think his talent and a lot of that prototypical size stuff that I talked about is his best attribute. It's just putting together some of the accuracy and things like that will be the difference between him having a really good year or bad year, whatever the case is.
Question from Zach. Any durability concerns? So, Trey, you may not know this. The last 2 years, Wisconsin has lost their starting quarterbacks to injuries.
Yeah.
What's the health here with Edwards?
Yeah, I mean, he had, in terms of this year, he did miss one game at the end of the year against Penn State. But overall, he is pretty durable and he will play through stuff. So he's a guy that's going to play through. Really, if he can play, he's going to play. Like he's a guy that loves football. A great guy in that type of way. He's tough, so he'll play if he can play. I wouldn't say it's a concern, but he did miss one game, last game of the season against Penn State. So I don't think his injuries are definitely concerned. Not a guy that you have to worry about, I would say, getting hurt. Had like a couple things pop up this year, but nothing that really kept him out of a game except for the last game of the season where he had like a weird hand issue. But other than that, he's a pretty durable type of kid. And he's well built and everything too. So he's not as small. Like Maryland was used to having Talia for a couple of years and he got banged up a lot. Like Billy Edwards he's a pretty big dude. And he's pretty durable. So you should feel pretty good about him in terms of the injury type of stuff.
Well, and something you mentioned earlier in the first segment about him maybe not always sliding. When you watch film of him, he takes some shots, like,
Yeah.
which is great, like, because he's tough. You can tell he's
Mhm.
tough. It's up after him, but you're also kind of like,
Mhm.
I don't know if I want you taking those shots. Do you see a lot of that?
Yeah, he definitely took some shots that he didn't need to, just because of how big he is, and stuff like that. I feel like he thinks he can, but like he doesn't need to. I guess that kind of depends on how the Wisconsin coaching staff kind of is like, you got to slide, man, or what the case is. But he's definitely a guy that should slide more than he does at times. But if he does get down, like I would really not have any durability type of concerns. But he is a guy that you're like, bro, you got to get down here in certain times.
A couple more questions just to wrap up here. This one is actually more Maryland based from Action Jackson. Do you feel Mike Locksley might be on the hot seat 2025?
I think so. If he has a bad year, I think he's on the hot seat. I just think it's tough. A lot of people wanted to put him on the hot seat after this year, and I was like, no, like we've had 3 straight bowl wins. I one bad year. We're not the type of program where one bad year you're on the hot seat now. So I do think next year, if it's a bad year, then we really have to be looking at him on the hot seat. But right now, I don't think he necessarily is. So I think it's more of a like if next year is another bad year, especially with the schedule that we have, we avoid a lot of the big dogs next year. Like we avoid Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon. So we avoid a lot of the big dogs. So you would expect it to be a decent season next year, hopefully. But I think it's more of a 2-year type of thing. If next year's bad, then the next year has to go well. But I also could see a world where he is possibly on the hot seat if things don't go well, or he could get fired at the end of next year if things go really bad. I could definitely see that being a possibility, but I see it more of a 2-year thing.
Let me ask you this, and we'll finish here. I'm always interested. You're a little bit of a younger fan, but
Hmm.
Maryland coming into the Big Ten. You
Hmm.
guys have been here for a while now, but obviously your history is not here. Do you have a
Hmm.
sense with maybe the older fan base or people who grew up with Maryland that this fit is feeling more normal, or does it still feel like a bad puzzle piece?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of fans have gotten like used to it. And even my parents, like they went, or my mom went to Maryland during like the ACC time and everything. And I feel like a lot of people have gotten used to it and feel like this is a better fit. They do miss some of the rivalries, especially specifically basketball. Like they miss some of the rivalries, like they miss playing like Duke every year and some of those, and like UNC, like those different things. But in terms of fit and everything, I feel like a lot of them feel like this is a better fit, and feel like it's in a good spot. I'm pretty young still, so I wasn't as much into this type of thing when Maryland was in the ACC. So personally, I can't really speak to it, but I feel like a lot of fans they miss some of the rivalries and stuff, but they do feel like the Big Ten's a pretty good fit overall.
No, great stuff as always, man. Trey, thank you for jumping on, talking a little Billy Edwards Jr. Badger fans, thank you for listening. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Big Ten, Locked On College Football, all the biggest news stories in both of those podcasts there at the Locked On Network. I am Ryan. He is Trey on Wisconsin, and we will talk to you later.